Hey everybody, Freddy here with another video. Today I want to ask you to come with me on a journey where we're going to explore the Azure Storage Service. We're going to be looking specifically at Blob. We're going to be looking at the write operations, the read operations. I'm going to start the video with a quick introduction to the service. Then I'm going to jump right into a demo where I'm going to show you how you can adjust the block size so you can limit the amount of transactions that you use when you write data to Blob. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel and like this video, and let's get to it. Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to go through an overview of the Azure Storage Service, then I'm going to jump into the demo, and also I'm going to make all the code that you're going to see in this video. It's going to be available on my GitHub, so please check the description down below where the link is to the code. All right, so the overview of Azure Storage. So the Azure Storage Account Service is divided into 4 different sections. When you create a storage account, the first thing you do is you create that storage account. Then after that, you're going to be able to create a blob or a container, as also we call it, or you can create a file share, which is the file here, or a queue or a table. Again, what we're going to do today is we're going to be looking at Blob, specifically Blob. So we're going to look at the when you look at the account structure, this is what you see. You have an account. The account has a container, and a container can have blobs. So when you look at the account is going to be the one that is going to compose or is going to create that URL that you're going to be accessing. So in other words, that account name becomes part of the URL, the access URL that you're going to connect into. Then the next thing is, if you see on the right hand side, the container becomes part of this URL. The container is, for a lack of a better term, is the folder where you're going to be keeping your files or your blobs. The blobs themselves, you can have block blobs, you can have append blobs, and you can have page blobs. Each one of those can serve different purposes. The block blobs, easy for me to say, is the most commonly used one. That's what I'm going to be showing you today. The append blob is typically used for logs, where you're going to be appending data into a growing file. That's what the idea is for append blobs. And then you have page blobs as well. Page blobs are typically for hard disks, virtual machine hard disks that you want to upload to Blob. The upload itself, the default is exactly the same. So when you start uploading data into Azure Blob, it doesn't matter if you use a block blob or an append blob or a page blob. If you don't specify any specific amount of data that you're moving into, it's going to default to a specific size. In other words, when you upload data, every transaction that happens is going to be a specific size. So in other words, if you're going to be uploading a 20 gig file, you're going to end up with an X amount of transactions, and how long is that transaction is going to take. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's move on to the next section here. The next section is the size of each of this area. So if you're using a block blob, you can store up to 190.7 terabytes. Page blobs, it's for random access files, like I said, for virtual hard disks, VMs, and it can be up to 8 terabytes in size. Append blobs is ideal for scenarios such as logging and data from virtual machines, like what I was stating in the previous slide. So all of this is basic information. Again, the one that we're going to be focusing on is block blob, just because we're going to be able to upload large amount of data in there. A little bit more about block blob. It can be up to 50,000 blocks, and each block in a block blob can be a different size. For this video, we're not going to be doing multiple sizes. We're only going to be using one size because we're going to divide the file into equally sized pieces, and then we're going to be uploading that into Blob. The next thing is the maximum amount of data that you can upload. So right here you can see the service version, and it says version 2019 and later 4 megabytes. So the maximum block size via put block, this is the operation put block, is 4,000 megabytes. The versions like 2016 and prior, it was 100 megabytes, and that is 4 megabytes as well prior to 2016. So again, this is via put block operation, and then the maximum blob size via put block is approximately 190.7 terabytes. So what does this mean? This means that when you're uploading a file to Blob, the maximum amount of data that you can write is 4,000 megabytes here. That's what that means. And it means that you can split the data into these chunks so that when you transfer data into Blob, this becomes the size of each transaction. And I keep talking about transactions, and why I keep talking about transactions, the reason is for this, because this is how you pay. So when you look at the operations, you are going to pay depending on this, on the tier of the Blob. So for example, you have premium, which is used for performance purposes. Then you have hot. Hot is usually used for data that you're going to be using very frequently. So the data that needs to be accessible at all times. Hot is typically cheaper on the storage, but it's a little bit more expensive on the retrieval of the data. So the cool is a little bit cheaper on the storage side. So if you keep it there for longer, you're going to be paying less, or you're going to be paying cheaper amount or less based on the storage. However, the retrieval is a little bit more expensive, as you can see here. The write and the read, they're a little bit different in price. The cold is it's another tier that is in preview, and then archive. Archive is typically for backups. So again, you pay less for the storage. However, if you go into the archive mode, before you can retrieve that data, you have to warm it up. You have to tell the system that you're going to be retrieving that data. So it takes a little bit longer. It's typically, the archive is typically used for archival purposes, such as backups that you're not going to be touching for a long time. Of course, the storage is cheaper, but the retrieval is a little bit longer. So now if you have what we call SLAs, so service level agreements, where you need a specific amount of time before you can get that data, take that in consideration, how long you need or how long you have in order to be able to retrieve that data. Again, hot is for data that needs to be available quickly and you're going to be using it all the time. Cool is something that is cheaper, however, is for data that you're not going to be touching very often. You're going to be touching, but maybe not every day. So this is how you decide where you're going to place this data. Again, one of the things that I want to point out is that you do pay for write operations. A write operation would be if you're writing a file to Blob, then that's going to be an operation. So the question is, you want to limit the amount of operations that you have when you're writing a blob to Azure Blob, because the fewer transactions you have, the less you're going to pay. So the demo is going to be pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a VM and I'm going to create a storage account. That storage account, I'm going to enable the insights, the logs, the log files and insights, so that we are able to see the write operations and the read operations. And this is how we're going to be able to see the amount of transactions for every write and every read as well, because this is one of the areas that I think it's very important to understand. We are in the portal. Let's go ahead and create a virtual machine. While this is being created, let's go ahead and create the storage account as well. I will create a container. Insights, and insights are already enabled, so I don't need to do anything else. So as you can see right now, I just created this account. This one, it says that only one transaction has taken place. So that's what I want to see. In the last 4 hours, one transaction. So now what I want to do is I want to go to the virtual machine, and I'm going to write to this blob. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to connect to this virtual machine. It's a brand new system, so we get an update. Make sure Python is installed. So we are going to say Python 3. It is already installed, so we don't need to do anything on that. Next thing we're going to do is install pip. Then install the Azure CLI client. We will try this link. I will put this in the description down below, so you can just copy paste. Okay, once that is installed, then we can do an AZ login, and this is going to allow us to log in to the portal. We are logged in, so now we can proceed to the next step. The next step is going to be moving data into the Azure Blob storage, but we don't have files at the moment. So let me go ahead and create a file. Okay, create a file. We're going to use the dd command. Input file equals dev 0. I'm going to use random. Output file equals, we're going to use 500 MB file.mp4. The byte size equals 1 megabyte, and we're going to do count equals 100, which is actually going to be a 100 meg file, not a 500. Let's do a 100, so it's easier to quantify. We're going to use the Azcopy command. So we're going to download the Azcopy. If you try to use Azcopy, it's going to say command not found because we haven't downloaded it yet. I copied some files so that I don't have to retype this. Again, I'm going to make these available on my GitHub so you can use them. I'm going to just for this test, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a azblobupload.sh. So let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, so what do I do here? What do I have is I need to change the variables in this file. So the storage account name is blob test. So let's go ahead and do that. Blob test fmd. Then it's asking me for the container name. Container name is blob test. The local file, it's not a 20 gig file, it's going to be a 100 MB file.mp4. That's the file that we created. And then how I'm going to call it once it gets up to blob is I'm going to call it 100 MB file.mp4. Okay, so this is what this does is just setting some variables here so that when I execute the AZ storage blob upload, it's going to execute this, and it's going to upload of type block. Okay, so I'm not specifying anything specific. I'm just doing an AZ storage blob upload, and I'm saying I'm just gonna upload this file. Okay, so write and quit. So let me go back to my storage account, and I'm going to be looking at the metrics. Excuse me, not metrics, insights. The storage account, and I'm going to insights. Again, at this point, in the last 4 hours, I have 31 transactions. So what we're looking for is we're trying to see how many transactions we are going to get with this transfer. So let's see right here, we're gonna write down 31 transactions, and let's go ahead and execute this AZ Blob upload.sh. The file was uploaded and is uploaded into Blob. Now I can go back to my storage account, and I can look at the insights, and the insights still telling me 31 transactions, so 11 transactions. In the last 5 minutes I got 11 transactions. In the last 15 minutes I got 11 transactions. So what does that tell me? It tells me that I was able to transfer 100 megabytes in 11 transactions. So if we do the math, 11 divided, or 100 divided by 11, we are looking at 9 megabytes per transaction. Okay, that's one test. Let's do another test, but this time we're going to do something bigger. Let's execute the same command. The command of creating a file, but this time let's create a bigger file. Let's create something that is going to be 1 gigabyte. Okay, so I have a 1 gig file, which is a 1 gig file. All right, so let's do that. Let's change this one to the 1 gig file to see how many transactions that gives me. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the transactions again here. Insights in the last 15 minutes. We have more transactions, so maybe it wasn't finished. I think it's going to be that it wasn't finished. We need to give it a little bit more time. It says that it was 54. This sounds a little bit more like it. Not 11 transactions, but 54 transactions. I think I looked at it too fast. So 54 transactions. Let's look at the calculator on that one. So 100 megabytes divided by 54 transactions. That's a 185 megabyte per transaction. Let's do it again. Let's run this again. So let's go ahead and write down 54 transactions, and we're going to write a 1 gig file. So let's go ahead and do that. That was pretty fast. Let's look at the insights, and we have to give it a little bit more time this time. We can see the transactions going up and then going down. So let's give it a few minutes just so that we can capture everything. While we wait, why this is working and it's not asking me for a username and password is because I logged in. When I did the AZ login, I was able to authenticate. So this script here is using those credentials that I had. This is the reason why it's doing it without asking me for any specific string. Now, if I use Azcopy, I can use that URL that specifies the credentials, and you can do it that way. I'm using something that is called Azblobupload. I'm using something that is called Azure Blob upload. This right here. So right now it's telling me that I don't have a file. I don't have the necessary things, because if you notice here, this is what I'm using here. The file name is the blob name, the account name is the storage account name, the account key is getting the value from that is stored from my AZ login, and then it's getting the container name from where I put it up here. So this is the reason why it's working. So let's go ahead and go back to this. Let's do that. Okay, this is better. This is telling me that 271 transactions in the last 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and take a look. 271. So we're gonna say it's a 1 gig file. So I'm gonna do 1,000 megabytes divided by 271 transactions. I close my calculator. $1,000 divided by 271 transactions. We're looking at roughly 4 megabytes per transaction. 4 megabytes per transaction. And that is a normal standard process. This is also exactly how it works if you do Azcopy and you don't specify the block size. It automatically defaults to 4 megabytes per transaction. So how can you figure out how many transactions you're gonna have? Well, again, remember, if you go back to the how many transactions, you get 10,000 transactions for a certain amount of money when you transfer into Blob. This is the right operations. Again, I'm looking at transactions here because this is a blob that is doing absolutely nothing at the moment. So whenever I'm writing to it, that I'm not looking at the specific write transactions, because that's all I'm doing. There is nothing reading. There is nothing doing anything else. Insights are the easiest ones to see, because I can see in the last 4 hours I've had 342. I can leave it at that, right? So I can just write it down, 342 transactions. So when I do a write, so when I'm gonna do another write, same file, the 1 gig file. It already exists. So let me change the blob name. Okay, it's a great test because I want to see the transactions. As you can see, this blob is failing because it says that the blob is already exists. So this is actually an amazing test because I want to know what happens, right, to my transactions. So when I go here and I look at the transactions, I did it 2 times. Before I had 342 transactions. So now I need to refresh. I have 603. Let's wait a little bit and see if this changes in any way. So again, the first write that worked was 271. Okay, says that in the last 30 minutes I've had 829 transactions. So let's look at the calculator. There you go. So what this tells me is that the transactions count. So what I did here is I tried to transfer this file 3 times. So 271 transactions. The first time it worked, the second time it failed, and the third time it failed because it said that it was already existed. It already existed. So, but if I multiply this times 3, because I did it 3 times, it's 813. So 829. So that means that I am getting the transactions do count even though the transfer is failing. So how can we limit this? The way to change this is to change the block size. So you can use Azcopy, for example. If I use Azcopy, or I can use Azcopy, gives me the ability to be able to change the block size. So that's one way that I can do it. I do have this. I have this file. So for this file, what I'm doing is I am taking. So for this next test, what I'm doing is I'm taking the file and I'm going to break it down into block sizes of a certain size. By default is 4 megabytes, so I'm not going to do 4 megabytes. This typically works very well when you have large files like 20 gig files and things like that, because you can see it clearly, but we are going to be able to see it anyway. I have this this connection string that needs a key. So let me go ahead and get that, because this is the wrong key. Where do I get that account key? I come to my storage account and I go to access keys and I copy this. Then I come here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this one because this one is an old one. It's not even active anymore. Now this is a Python file, so I'm going to use Python, but I need to change the file name here. So cp 1GB file to 1GB file MP4. Okay. AZ 8 block. Okay, but I forgot that I need to change the block size. So I want to do, so right now it's set to 8. But what I want to show you is that it doesn't need to be 8. The maximum block size is 100, so you can do 100 megabytes per block. So this would be 100 megabytes per block. So if we execute this AZ, oh, we can't execute it like this. It's the Python 3 AZ8. Oh, the client is not installed. Okay, so I need to install pip install Azure Storage Blob. Let's run this file again. And it finished, so let's look at the insights. 895, what was before? 603. Wait, no, that was the wrong one. Let's see, in the last 5 minutes, we have 7 transactions. It's still probably coming in, still a little bit more. Because if you think about it, we're transferring 1,000 megabytes but each block size is 100 megabytes, so we should get 10 transactions because we're transferring 100 megabytes per transaction. So that should give us 10 transactions, not 7. Okay, here you go, 12 transactions. The reason is 12 is because it's 10 transactions, 10 write transactions, and there should be 2, one list, and another one I think is list as well. So here you have it. This is how you're able to find how many transactions, and this is how you're able to change the block as well, the block size. So in the you can always use the azcopy command. Azcopy, when you do this, it gives you the ability to see what options you have. Azcopy gives you the ability to be able to set the block size. Okay, so when you use the azcopy command, there's this there is an option that you have, which is the block size. Let me find it. Right here, the block size megabyte. This one, use this block size in megabytes when uploading to Azure Storage and downloading from Azure Storage. The default value is automatically calculated based on the file size. But you can use this block size in megabytes to set 100 megabyte blocks, so that you're not using the default. So when you do the file transfer, you limit the amount of transactions that you have based on the block size. So not to make this video too long, I'm going to leave it at that for now. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I know I didn't want to make this video too long. However, I wanted to show you the insights of sending data to Azure Blob. I hope it was beneficial to you, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And I hope you learned something. Hey, thank you so much for staying to the end of the video. I hope you learned something, and I hope you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.